Old world wine, new world wine, and a new word to add to our wine vocabulary. All that and so much more on this episode of The Average Wine Enthusiast. Hi there, everybody. My name is Mike LaPlante, and I'm the Average Wine Enthusiast. On this episode, I thought we would talk about a theme that will probably reoccur as I do more episodes. And that theme is old world wines versus new world wines. Now, what is the difference? You may even have seen signs in your local wine stores telling you that there's old world wines over here and new world wines over there. The simple explanation of the difference between the two is where the wine originates from. Old world wine is typically French, Italian, Spanish, Portuguese, Greece, and Germany. I might be missing a country or two, but typically right in the European proper area. New World wine is everywhere else, basically. And, that includes United States and Australia and Chile and Argentina and places like that. Now, stylistically speaking, Old World wines are often described as lighter, having less alcohol, having higher acidity, less fruity. New World wines, on the other hand, are often described as tasting riper, having higher alcohol levels, and tasting more fruity. It's more fruit forward, as it were. Now, that's stylistically speaking what you're going to find in the wines themselves and how they differentiate from each other. However, there's more to it than that. In Old World wines, oftentimes where the wine comes from dictates the way that winemakers can make the wine. And so let's say in Burgundy, you have to make sure that you have a certain amount of Pinot Noir, and you have to make sure that you use only these certain other varietals as blending grapes. And they have to be grown within that region to put that appellation basically on the label. So that's what usually tells us what the wine is going to be like, is where it's from in these old world wines. So that's one aspect of it. And as far as the winemakers being able to do something different, well, they have to work within that framework that has been set up by them, or set up for them by these rules and these committees that make up these old world wine appellations and organizations which control how each wine is made. And then that way it keeps things pure, as it were. It's kind of like a lineage of sorts, and these winemakers have to hold true to that. Having said that, in New World wines, that's not the case at all. So they're free to do whatever they want. And that's part of why we now have single varietals for sale, is because that was a way for New World wines to differentiate themselves from the Old World wines. They were able to sell single varietals and not have too much rules behind it other than the percentage of that varietal in the bottle. So that's one thing that helps winemakers make their wine a specific way in New World wines. They can follow trends, and they can follow the upcoming tastes of people, and they can see where things are going just based on data. And right now data is plentiful in terms of what people are buying and drinking. Whereas in Old World wines, they have very little wiggle room. People in California and Argentina and Canada, they can make their wines based on what people are buying and go towards that trend, and hopefully they want to sell more wine, of course. One of the other things that I wanted to discuss in terms of Old World wine and New World wine is This is another word that I want you to add to your vocabulary. It's terroir. And what does that mean in terms of the way it affects the wine itself? Now, obviously, the word terre is in there, and that's a Latin word meaning earth. But there's more to it than just the soil itself. The soil is one of the aspects that make up the terroir of where any given wine is that comes from. There's the climate as well. And sometimes in certain places, there's like what they call microclimates, where they're in a very specific valley, and that valley will have a climate that can be very different than one that's even 3-4 miles away from there. So that the terroir from that area is different from a place that could be very close to where they are, where one grape is grown compared to another. And the terrain as well. So there's things like typography, whether it's really hilly or it's relatively flat. The actual altitude of the land that you're growing your grapes on, like let's say in Argentina, where they're growing grapes at 4,000 feet above sea level, the Malbec is going to taste a very specific way based on the terroir of Argentina, the Mendoza area there. And of course, the same holds true in Italy and France, that those places have very specific terrains as well. Some people may also say that the tradition is also part of the terroir of certain wine making techniques, especially in places where that has been around for a very long time, this tradition. There's one place that I'm thinking about that really puts this in perspective, and it's in France, and it's in the Rhone Valley. It's called Chateau de Caume. And in this winery, in the basement of it, there is still I wouldn't say it's remnants. It's still, it's not functional. They don't use this aspect of it, but it's still present to this very day. They may use it for different purposes, but there's limestone basically is what's in the ground. And so inside of the basement, cut into the limestone, is actual infrastructure for making wine that has been there since the 2nd century. So that really brought to light how things are still in place, even though they may not even be using them for the original way that they were meant to be used. But they're still there, and they're still in use, but not necessarily in the same way. And it's been there for a very long time. The 2nd century, that's 200 minus 1900, that's 1700 years that this infrastructure inside of this winery has been there. So a lot of people think that tradition that is still there is part of the terroir. Some people argue that it's not, that it's more outside-based stuff, but I can see that those folks have some kind of argument there. So what I thought we would do is taste a couple different wines, a New World wine and an Old World wine. I decided to pick a Pinot Noir. In Old World wine, Pinot Noirs come from Burgundy, Bourgogne. And Pinots outside of the area where Old World wines come from, whereas a good place where they're coming from is the Russian River Valley, which is a sub-valley of the Sonoma Valley. And some killer Pinots come out of there. Also in Dry Creek Valley, which is also in Sonoma. And in Oregon as well, they grow some delicious Pinots there as well. And even in Washington State, they're getting a name for making some pretty decent Pinots up there as well. So I was thinking that we would head over to the drinking room and try us some Old World and some New World wines. Come on, let's go. All right, this is my favorite part about doing a YouTube channel on drinking wine, and that is actually drinking wine. What we have here is a Old World Pinot Noir and a New World Pinot Noir. Pinot Noir, what a grape it is. It's hard to grow, grows in cold climates typically. The berries don't grow all the same size, and they really take on the characteristics of its terroir. This old world Pinot Noir that we're drinking is, of course, from Burgundy, or as the French say, Bourgogne, and it is a Louis Max Boucharme Pinot Noir, and it comes from Burgundy, from the Georges Côte d'Or in France. And it has 12.5% alcohol. So let's give this a whirl first. Okay, that smells candy-like. Some kind of floral notes in there. Strawberry. And a very organic smell. Somewhat earthy. Reminds me of cheese rind. But a beautiful bouquet. More floral notes. It's a very specific flower that I'm getting. It's a flower that you can eat, an edible flower. For some reason, I can't think of what it is. A little bit of mushroom in here. Raspberry. It's light, but it's a subtle. It excites my palate subtly, and the tannins are apparent, but they're not dominant. They're not a dominant aspect of the flavor of this wine. Very nice. I love this wine. It's very, very nice, very light, but yet full of flavor, full of body, not terribly complex. Thin legs. Seems like higher alcohol than what it says, just based on the legs. Because if I was to do a blind taste test, which I was actually thinking of doing, that would have been one way that I'd be able to tell the difference between the old world wine and the new world wine. Usually the old world wine has less alcohol, and it's usually, doesn't have that same characteristic that is associated with high alcohol. Let's go for the new world wine. What do we have here is a Rodney Strong Russian River Pinot Noir. It's a 2016, as what the old world wine is a 2016, and we'll try to make it as even as possible. Rodney Strong. It's one of those brands that is a huge beverage company. I don't know if they do anything else besides wine, but I remember a friend of mine, Craig Harvey. Hey, if you're watching, Craig, hi, give me a call. Let's have a glass of wine together, maybe. And what he would tell me is, it was like a saying, Rodney Strong, you can't go wrong with a Rodney Strong. And, because they made everything. They made Cabernet Sauvignons from Napa Valley. They made Merlots from Sonoma. They had the whole gamut of wine that you could get from them. It's just one of those companies that really covers all the bases, because you can get a $50 bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon Rodney Strong from Napa Valley at the local liquor store here. But this is a Russian River Valley Pinot Noir that we're drinking, which I have had a few Pinot Noirs from the Russian River Valley and from the Dry Creek Valley, which isn't far from there. And they're amazing. They're on a level of their own. I'm not sure where Rodney Strong sources their grapes from, but they call it Russian River Valley Pinot Noir. I've never seen Rodney Strong. They don't have a place in the Russian River Valley where you can go get their wine. I think they have their winery is in Napa Valley, huge complex there. So I don't. This may not be indicative. It won't be indicative of Russian River Valley Pinot Noir, but it is indicative of New World Wine Pinot Noir. And like I said, Pinot Noir is one of those grapes that definitely take on the characteristics of its terroir. So let's give this a little sniff. There's some candy in there, like licorice, hint of vanilla, and maybe a little bit of chocolate. Not terribly fruity. No, maybe some cherry in there, but vanilla, licorice, for sure. Reminds me of candy. Let's give it a sip. Cherry, ripe berries, like really ripe raspberries. Hint of oak is in there, and some vanilla as well. Now the tannins on this, I find, are more apparent. They not only excite my palate, they also right on the sides of my tongue as well. I could feel that feeling you get, little rusty feeling you get on your tongue from tannins. Another nice Pinot, though, I have to admit, Pinot is such a great wine to drink. They tend to be maybe a little bit more expensive. I didn't pay more than $25 for either one of these, but I think they're both more than 20. But I tend to think that they're worth it. I love Pinots. You never know what you're going to get. That's the thing I like about it. There's some Pinots that I've had from British Columbia, from Cassini cellars, that are like nothing else I've ever drank. And even right here in Essex County, the Musedri winery, they also make Pinots. They tend to be pricey as well, but what they do is they make it and then they hold it. So when you go there, you're usually buying 5-year-old Pinots for anywhere between 30 and 40 bucks. And but they're very good. Probably some of the best wine in Essex County is from Mr. Musedri. He also makes a nice Syrah as well, if you're ever in the neighborhood. So Rodney Strong, New World wine, definitely more alcoholic as well, I can tell. Alcoholic. It makes it seem like you got an issue here, Mr. Rodney Strong. What is the alcoholic content? 14.5, so 2% more alcohol by volume in the Rodney Strong than the 12.5 in the Old World. Even though that seems like it's a little bit more than 12.5, you know, there's variances when they print up these wine labels, but they have to stay within a certain variance to be on the up and up. So there you go, Old World versus New World. Definitely different styles for sure. I would highly suggest you go out and check out the Old World wines from Spain and Italy and France, and then see if you can find a counterpart to it in the New World. That's the thing about in Italy, especially, you don't find a lot of those varieties growing anywhere else other than in Italy. And there's something like the wine that I had got turned on to in the last episode, Mencia, that only grows in Spain and Portugal, which of course that's Old World wine right there. So there's not a lot of choice out there as far as some wines go. Like I said, in Italy and those two wines in Spain, you're only going to find them in Old World countries. That's another appeal to Old World wine as well. But of course, there's Pinots and Malbecs and Cabernet Sauvignons. There's lots of New World wine out there that is only evolving because they can do whatever they want as far as making wine, according to what people are liking, the tastes and trends. They can follow them as closely as they want, as opposed to sticking to tradition like they do with the Old World wines. But it's always good to have that in place, I think. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. I guess that's going to do it for this week. Thanks a lot to the Big Oregon Trio for letting me use the music for the show. Hey, if you have any wine-loving friends like yourself, let them know about the show. Pass it along. Copy the link from down below and shoot it off in social media or where have you. Until next time, everybody, I'm Mike LaPlante, and I'm the Average Wine Enthusiast. Salute!